Okay, folks, I want to call the Hopkinton Town Council meeting of April 1st, 2019 to order with a moment of silent meditation and salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up is the consent agenda. Approved Town Council meeting minutes of March 18, 2019. Executive session minutes of March 18, 2019. Budget workshop notes of March 11, 2019. Budget workshop notes of March 13, 2019. Approve abatements resulting from adjustments on tangibles and real property submitted by the tax assessor. Approve refund as a result of duplicate real estate payments submitted by the tax collector.
I'm going to pull the 18th.
A motion to approve the consent agenda, pulling town council meeting minutes of the 18th.
A second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
I have something on the 18th as well.
Okay.
That's-
Mine's on page 2, about halfway down. This is something I would get Kevin. Kevin? Hi,
Yep.
Kevin.
Aye.
On the minutes, I had asked you if, it's about halfway down, and you see where it says Solicitor McAllister?
Yep.
So I asked you about the alternate for the planning board, and the way it reads, I thought something, but this is all it says, is indicated it was not in the charter, but the voting by alternate members was something that could be handled by the planning board. There is some flexibility. If someone is absent, the alternate can sit and participate fully. That's the question. If someone is absent, we know the alternate can step in.
Right.
But what I specifically wanted to know, and you can clarify, is it true that if there were only 3 board members, if they only had 3, the alternates could then bring it up to 5 because there's 2 vacant positions? Can they fill a vacant position, or only if someone is unavailable?
For that meeting?
For that particular meeting?
Okay, it actually has nothing to do with the quorum. So if one of the 5 regular members of the planning board was absent, then an alternate can take that seat for that meeting and would be a full voting member for that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And if there were 2 alternates present and 2 regular planners were absent, both of them could sit as full voting planners that meeting. So they have the power they have the full power to participate if there is an empty chair at the table.
Even if they have a quorum?
Even if they have, it's nothing to do with
okay.
quorum.
It's that sentence before that it's when you first, one sentence up, Solicitor McAllister indicated the alternate would be a full voting member when the alternate needed to be involved to meet quorum requirements.
I didn't make,
So maybe if we...
maybe 2 sentences were strung together, but the way that should read, Solicitor McAllister indicated the alternate would be a full voting member whenever there was a vacancy at the meeting of any regular planning board member.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with the quorum.
All right, thank you. Just that one correction.
I have page 4. And it's the section that says so voted. Midway through, it says where it states that 2 police vehicles were leased. Not where it states. Doesn't make any sense. Where it
It's
states.
missing an H.
Yep. Okay. that was
Motion
it.
to approve town council meeting minutes of March 18th with corrections.
Second.
Motion made second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. First public forum. Anyone wishing to be heard? No? Okay. Next, under my report, on March 26th, the full council met at the high school library for a joint meeting with the legislative delegation. I guess Dennis Algier and Brian Patrick Kennedy were there to talk about school-related issues. And it was an okay meeting, I guess. I wish more of our legislative delegation were there, but they weren't. So it was, I want to thank everyone from the council that attended, because we had a full council at that meeting, and I think aside from us, there was only one member from Charlestown, and there was no members from Richmond. So anyway, thank you for everyone for participating.
Yeah, I would like to comment that, you know, I've been,
I believe there was
Oh,
one member
was there
from
one?
Richmond.
I believe that they should have this on, and I know some people will disagree, but I think they should have had it on an omnibus meeting. But the legislature usually meets like late Tuesday afternoon till Thursday, and I don't know what the schedule is, and goes into a few hours. So if the school committee wants to meet with the legislators, somebody, the superintendent or the chairman of the school committee should check and see where their availability is, because the legislature is going on. The General Assembly usually ends in June, and March is like midway, so it's very difficult to have the legislators there considering their schedule, because the Charter Hall meeting is at night. And I do think it's a great tribute to Hopkinton that our council was there at Charter Hall, despite the criticism about Hopkinton and Charter Hall. We were there, and I think that says a lot about this town council. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay, thanks. Next, town manager report, Bill McGarry.
Thank you. During the third week in March, my office prepared 6 requests for proposals, RFPs for the town Department of Public Works. They included RFPs for mid-grade gasoline, diesel fuel, number 2 fuel oil, heating and cooling system maintenance, propane gas and burner services, and winter sand. They were all advertised in the Wesley Sun on March 24th, with a bid opening scheduled for April 16th and scheduled for a bid award consideration by the town council on May 6th.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Any questions for Bill? Okay, thank you. First up on the new business, discuss, consider, and vote whether to award a bid for the removal of VTC tile and installation of an epoxy floor in the Recreation Department's Activity Center to New England Epoxy Flooring in the amount of $11,900, funded through a grant from the Rhode Island Department of Elderly Affairs in the amount of $6,361, and the Recreation Department's grant account number 03-730-5610. Bill.
Thank you. On February 3rd, an advertisement was placed in the Wesley Sun to solicit bids for the removal of the existing VTC tile and the installation of an epoxy floor in the Recreation Activity Center by the Crandall House. The town only received one bid in the amount of $14,000, and I spoke with Recreation Director Mary Sawyer, and she contacted the person who submitted the bid, and she was able to negotiate a lower price of $11,900 as a result of DPW providing a generator for the work, and also the Recreation Department will provide a dumpster. We did get a grant through Mary Sawyer's efforts from the Rhode Island Department of Elderly Affairs in the amount of $6,361 for the project, and the remaining balance will be paid from the Recreation grant account that has approximately just a little over $21,000 in it.
Okay, yes.
I actually have a comment. I just got a phone call today from RIDOT, Joelle, and I have her phone number, but at home, she informed me that AARP has some immediate grants available for elderly that they sort of need to use up. And she was sending me the information via computer, so I will get that to you, but it's something they need to use now, and they're looking for people to take money.
That's us.
Yeah, exactly. And this is Department of Elderly Affairs, so it should be right up their alley. So I will get that information to you tomorrow. She just called me this afternoon.
Sure, I appreciate that, thank you.
It's AARP, it's for elderly. It doesn't have to be municipal.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm telling you. That was like, blue.
So Bill was kind enough to put a motion in this bid award.
Move that the Hopkinton Town Council award a bid for the removal of existing VTC tile and the installation of an epoxy floor in the town's Recreation Department's Activity Center to New England Epoxy Flooring in the amount of $11,900, funded through a Department of Elderly Affairs in the amount of $6,361, and the Recreation Department's grant account number 03730561.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay, number 2 under new business, discuss and consider possible exploration of potential improvements or revisions to the Charahoe Act as suggested by the Charahoe member towns and/or Charahoe School District. This agenda is on our agenda, this item, I should say, is on our agenda because Richmond Town Council had sent us a letter, at least Lisa, I believe, and wanting to meet regarding opening up the Charahoe Act for a couple different reasons. I was planning on going, but then I get a call from Gary Wright, the president at Richmond, and said they're canceling the meeting because they weren't prepared or whatever. So anyway, at some point they may reschedule it, but so I don't know if you folks are interested in perhaps going and discussing this. You know, it can be as a council or individual, so yes, sure.
When I saw this on the agenda, I actually called the other regional school districts today to find out how are they charging the individual towns. Are they just dividing it in half, or are they doing it by the school enrollment? And they're doing it by the school enrollment. However, one of them suggested, which I've heard suggested before, that maybe we might want to combine our reevaluation of the properties and divide that way. You know, make that, in other words, that we're one property.
You mean the real estate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but she said you have to all be reevaluating your property at the same time. And I don't know that the other 2 towns are doing that, right?
Yeah, we go through a statistical reval and then what's the other one called? A full reval, right, every 10 years, and statistical every 3. So, yeah,
Yeah,
so,
but the other 2 towns are, do you know where they are in there?
They're not on the same side as
so. Anyway, so, yeah,
And I've thought about it and I can't really see a more equitable way than by the student enrollment. However, I think what that means is eventually down the road, Charahoe will be paying 0. You know, and Charlestown.
There's a study I want you to see. I know the 4 of us are familiar with it. It's, Lisa, it's called, I think it's MGM.
MGT.
Oh, MGT. And if you could get a copy of that to Sharon, it explains, it was a study done and it was funded by the 3 town councils more than 10 years ago. And they did a study of the financing, how we pay. And that would be very helpful to you to understand why we're stuck where we are. It's a very good, and then it offers a solution.
It does?
Oh, yes, it
Then
does.
why didn't we take it?
Because we would take it, and Richmond would love it too, but Charlestown don't, because they get affected by it. You need that study, and then you'll understand a little bit
It's
about it.
kind of obvious.
Well,
No, it's not. We have 3 separate tax rates. And
Right,
that's our
I know
problem.
that.
Right, I know you know that, but you need to look over that study. It would be helpful.
And I think one of the other things that Gary Ritchie did bring up is the idea of taking a rolling quorum, rolling average of the 5-year student changes, which I think might be very helpful, and I think most of the times may decide to agree with that. But I think we can certainly move forward on that, and that might help us quite a bit to at least balance off the students and the costs of the students as they go up in Richmond and Hopkinton.
Yes, so Scott,
Okay, I have quite a bit to say, and I have some ideas. The bottom line is the politics of Charahoe, and I've lived here all my life, is the fact of the matter is that I think Charahoe, the establishment, always likes to cater to Charlestown because the fear was that if we ever had an equalized tax rate or anything of that nature, Charleston would leave because Charleston got very low taxes. In fact, last time we knew it was the 4th lowest Rhode Island out of 39 cities in town. And I don't know where it rates now, but I know a couple of evaluations, a couple of decades ago at least, the town of Charleston's property value was so phenomenal, it was more than Hopkinton and Richmond combined.
It's 3 times ours.
And the bottom line is if you took the same family, same household income, same type of house, they pay considerably less. So it's like the political kiss of death, because the Terre Haute establishment, or through the years, if you talk that way, Charleston, they're afraid that Charleston will leave. But the thing is, I think the state has to step up more to play. This is what I would like to see on the agenda with the counties, okay? Number one, I've been kicking on, I want a frank discussion, because I tried to initiate this in December. I put the town clerk's office through the hoops notifying everybody. I want a discussion about promoting the General Assembly doing more with different role players in the education process to promote Article 12, Section 1 of the Rhode Island State Constitution, which directs the Rhode Island General Assembly to promote education, because they fell very short of that. We've seen in this state 38 studios, we've seen them worry about Pawtucket Red Sox ballpark, and they don't think enough of standing up for the children of this state, which is the future of this state, and they don't think enough of the property taxpayers in this state who live in towns of various accessible bases. I want that discussed. And it might not go anywhere, but we should take a stand. And other state funding matters from the state. And the other thing I want, and I know I'm obsessed with it, and I have a fixation on it.
Don't tell me management's not.
Absolutely, but listen, just indulge me, just indulge me.
But also remember, we have heard this, and we're all aware too.
But
So to
let
talk
me-
to the audience, because they may need to know it. We certainly
Okay.
have known about this.
what I'd like to see put in the Terre Haute Act, and I give a political out to the school committee because the school committee doesn't want to hear it, but this is what I think they should do. They should have a Terre Haute Act to require an outside management study at certain time intervals, maybe every 10 years. They have a discussion about it, and if they don't want to do it, they can vote against it. But it makes a stand in the Terre Haute Act that we believe that them looking on occasion, maybe 10 years, 15 years, whatever time frame, they put it on the agenda and at least discuss it, and if they want to say no, they can say no, but at least they're forced to discuss it. And you know something, the most important thing is to force people to talk about things, because a lot of people don't want to talk about things, they want to change the subject. And I think that's something which takes, it's approaching just around $60 million right now, and you don't know where this is going to go. So I don't think it hurts to talk about something. You just vote on it and say, we don't want to go there, and we put them on the record. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm interested in meeting with the other member towns, Richmond and Charlestown, because this funding mechanism that's built into the Charo Act isn't quite working. It's just not sustainable, and whether it's a 3-year, 5-year rolling average, something has to be done. So I'm interested in opening up the act so that we can get a more equitable funding mechanism for us and moving forward, because it's just not sustainable. Case in point, this year, right out of the gate, we're above the 4% cap because of an enrollment shift. Charlestown lost 61, we gained 21, and it's just not going to work. In other years, they've just raised the operating budget. So, you know, I've often thought too. I read the act, which I've never really done in its entirety before, Charo Act. We do lease the buildings for $1, the 2 elementary schools, and maybe there's something in there that we can work in there. If our bill goes above a 4% cap, it's a sliding scale where we charge more in rent, and it's not going to go to the operating budget, it's going to come out of fund balance. Something so that, because again, we pleaded, I did, and I think Sharon and Barbara at that meeting, and our school committee sat with their hands, sat on their hands. I asked them for $127,000 in cuts. Not one of them made any suggestive cuts. except for the chairperson who lives in Richmond, made a cut from 7 to 6% on their health care, and it saved us about $55,000. So it's just, it's just, if you don't get any help and you're pleading for this stuff, something's got to be done. So I don't know whether this legislative change in this act would ever come to fruition. It may not, but it's something we have to think about. So
Or at least try.
right.
And
I
I still,
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I still also worry about the, management
Study.
of effort, no.
Oh,
Maintenance of effort, when it means that they can never reduce their budget below last year's budget, and if they have $1 million that's sitting in there from 2 years ago, you can't ever get to it.
Right. Right.
It's always gonna be on top of that, and that $1
And
million
it was
is just
Exactly.
sitting there going on and on.
And it was determined
That
through
makes me
my
crazy.
question to the finance director of our town, Brian Rosso, what the maintenance of effort figure was, how far were we away from that, and we were 400,000 away. So they had enough room to cut that figure and still not affect their overall funding from the federal, state, wherever they get their money from, so.
I think Sharon should be, because they also have, the bottom line of the school budget also is, as I understand it, if it's a non-recurring expense, if it's something that they buy, could be a piece of equipment, a vehicle, pickup truck, whatever, that is considered a non-recurring expense, and you don't include that
That's correct.
in maintenance of effort.
That's correct. I think it's certainly worth addressing, because both Hopkinton and Richmond need to address it. Charleston, I doubt, will want to address it, and even if they don't, I think that Hopkinton and Richmond should get together and at least talk about it. I do think that's important, but I don't necessarily think that you'll have Charleston on board.
Although, Bill, do you want to maybe just comment? I think Brian met with the other two finance directors at a location maybe in Charlestown, perhaps, I'm not sure where, to discuss different funding mechanisms, perhaps, or some way to better calculate the expenses for Charles, right?
He did, but unfortunately, there was a woman from Charleston who was going to do some work on that in order to do some research, in order to at least begin to try to make the system fair, but she left employment in Charleston.
Oh, she did.
We got an email message last week from the town manager in Charleston where she's taking another job. She moved out of state. So that's kind of in advance right now.
So we'll have to try again.
So much for that.
The meeting that we're kicking around, if we get, no matter when we call this meeting, all it's going to be is a lot of talk. So I would rather see our finance director look at this issue and come up with, and it's a Richmond-Hopkinton problem, it's not a Charlestown problem, but maybe there is a way to average out based upon the past, and maybe there is language that you can put in here that allows a town to participate in it, so that way Richmond and Hopkinton could participate, and Charleston could say, well, we don't need to.
Right.
So the best thing to do is get your homework done, then have a meeting if you think it's even necessary, and it probably is. Or you might come up with language and then we send it to Richmond and say, what do you think?
Yeah, right.
As much work as we can get on presenting a solution is better than, because we're just going to have a meeting, we're going to talk about it and say, yeah, maybe you ought to do it, so let's just do it.
I think it's
See what we come up with.
I think it's a good idea, especially if we can just get Hopkinton and Richmond's finance directors together to come up with something that would help us balance the problem and then address Charleston, because they're not going to be helpful at the beginning, but maybe they'll start understanding and if we come up with some partial solutions, even if it's not a full solution. And certainly I'd work with the school as well on the
Two other
learning
things.
averages.
Two other issues. Page 13 of the General Act.
Yep.
You don't even have to go to it. I just wanted to point out that that's at the bottom, section 13. And I asked you to look at section 1. Section 13, number 1.
Yep.
For a student who enters the elementary school in kindergarten will be assured matriculation in that school. So if you start in kindergarten in Oak Valley,
We'll stay there.
you can stay there, nobody can make you move, and if you have brothers and sisters that come along, then they can do the same thing. Richmond, only by, well, it doesn't even matter, it's been pointed out numerous times over and over from time to time that we have two schools. We have two elementary schools, so that means something. So apparently is right. That section there protects our students and allows us to stay in their own elementary school. This idea of letting kids go to the closest school, well, that's a nice sentence and it makes sense. But we don't have a problem that way. We really don't. There's only one little section of Richmond that's over the bridge. It's just this little neighborhood. But aside from that, when we had a population, when we had classroom sizes were getting big and we were bursting at the seams, they put in a portable classroom at Hope Valley and Ashway. And they stayed there for decades, and then population had been going down, student population's been going down. And we didn't need them anymore, and they took them away. And I heard that Chariho still has them. Whether they have them or not, Richmond needs to forget that we have two schools. That's not an issue. The issue is if they're having crowding, then why can't they have a portable classroom? Why do we have to muck about the Chariho Act and I don't know, let kids go in all different directions? So anyway. That was something I'd like to suggest to them, but, and the other one is for the newspaper. We have population shifts, and our budget went up, or Richmond's goes up, because there's more students, and everybody's, oh, well, enrollment increased. But overall, it keeps the total numbers going down, down, down. It's still been going
They're
down.
paying for Charlestown's kids leaving.
Yeah, and all it is there was one year, you know, we wait for those numbers because the shift, we want to see, there was whoever loses the most students the fastest gets the break. And one year we got a break because we lost more students than Richmond did. I mean, it's like a gamble. Anyway, that's all I gotta say.
Well, one of the things that Sylvia is completely right about, and I have been at all of these school board meetings, both Ashway and Hope Valley are not over studented. There's not too many people in them. Richmond has gone down from 500 to almost 360. So overall, even as we lose or as we gain, we're still under the capacities of the schools of Hope Valley, Ashway, and Richmond. And I was told at just the last meeting, one of the Richmond counselors said, oh, we are just at the walls. You're not. You used to have two principals. Now even Barry Ritchie's considering doing one principal because the quantity of students have gone down. We also added a third, they added a third grade teacher, which meant they had a classroom for her at Richmond. It is incorrect to say our schools are bursting at the seams. None of the elementary schools are, not any longer. There is space, it can be used. And if we have two schools for 400 students, and Richmond has one school for 360, it's the same amount of space, whether we do it in two schools or they do it in one. So that's just something that comes up all the time, and it's just not true any longer.
And one of the other things that I talked to Susan Rogers about was, is there a way for us to have a certain part of the budget be called fixed costs that you could divide by 3 and then do the student enrollment on top of that? And I know that would be a much more complicated formula, and I'm not sure that it would end up
Being better.
but it's a thought.
It has been looked at.
It is,
And you should look at it again.
exactly. It has been looked at, it has been addressed, and it was again one where you have to open the Chariho Act in order to make that happen. So is it
Because the
worth
funding mechanism is based on the
Right. And so the funding mechanism is in the Chariho Act, and if you remove the Chariho Act, you can address the funding mechanism.
And that's my main thrust of opening it.
Yeah,
Change that funding mechanism.
I would like to state that the political and legal reality of Chariho is that every town has a veto power. So you can talk what you like, and I might agree with you, but the fact of the matter is, in order to pass any changes in the Chariho Act, all 3 towns have to vote to doing that. The only exception to that rule is that I know that they've gone to the legislature when they changed the meeting date for the annual meeting, which there was no vote that's in the Charahoe Act. But as far as anything else, every town votes on it, and every town has a veto power. So each town can check each other, except on the budget, because it's a majority vote on the budget. That's the politics and legality of the Charahoe Regional School District.
So anyway, so I guess maybe we can put some things together and then have Lisa at some point reach out to Sarah over in Richmond and see about trying to coordinate another meeting. But I guess it's certainly imperative not just to have Richmond there, but to also have Charlestown, you know. Even though they may not support a lot of the changes, we certainly do need their support to open up the act, so we have to dance around that issue, so anyway. So that's that, right? Did you have anything, Dorothy? Yeah, please, yeah. On this particular topic?
Dorothy Gardner, Canonship Driftway. First of all, I'm not sure that every regional school in the state of Rhode Island taxes on capitation.
On what?
The number of children.
I just called today. They all do.
Pardon?
They all do.
They all do.
Yeah.
Okay. And secondly, I'm not sure that the centers of learning in each elementary school are legal with the Charahoe Act, because according to the Charahoe Act, the children in each town go to school in that town. So now, if you want your child to go to Hopkinton for a course that they offer in their elementary school, and you live in Richmond, you know, I don't know how this all came about. You know how we have these different centers of learning in the schools? And I don't know how that goes with the, I mean, I didn't vote on it. And usually when a change is made, the people have to vote as to whether they accept that change. And that change would involve having a child from one town go to school in another town, which should not even be legal. So if you'd like to look into that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
You know, but, you know, that's kind of what happens, you know, they just kind of sneak these things in. Oh, you know, we'll just do this. And any change in the Charahoe Act, or any change in the way the school is run, or any new buildings that are added, need to go to the people, not just to the school committee or to the superintendent.
Thank you, Dorothy. All right, so that sounds okay. Any other comments on this particular item, folks? Okay, thank you very much. Next up, boards and commissions. Number 1, discuss, consider, and possibly vote on the planning board alternate.
I'd like to make a motion that Carolyn White be appointed as alternate member of the planning board.
Second?
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? I have one question for Carol. She can't get away that easy. The same thing I already addressed with Steve, so I just want to make sure. I read the notes and it wasn't terribly clear. I just want to make sure you're going to be objective on any topic, whatever it comes before the board, not just, you know, go along to get along. You know, it's really important. As I mentioned to Steve in his interview, you know, I was on the planning board, and it's easy to kind of go with the crowd, you know, because you may not know all the aspects of what they're talking about, but, you know, just be your own person,
Absolutely.
basically, so.
Unfortunately, that is one of my personality traits.
Okay.
Some call it outspoken.
That's it.
Thank you.
So motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Oh, John.
Joe Morrell. I've known both Carolyn and Steve for the past year or so, and you can become friends, but you can also become people that work together and have a difference of opinion. And in both cases, we've disagreed on several different topics, but we've been able to come back to a consensus on our opinions. So they both are objective from what I've found during this whole process that we've worked together. I may say one thing and they may have an entirely different opinion. So I feel that they would both be great candidates because of their commitment to the town. And I think that's the biggest thing, is it's a commitment from the town. At the last meeting, when we had the animal control here, first thing Steve did he walked out, and he doesn't realize that I was even going to say this, but he walked out and volunteered to help at the shelters. He has rescue dogs. That's his commitment, and I know Carolyn's commitment, other than finances, and they both have a strong commitment to our town. And I think that's very important. We're always looking for people to come and help us on our boards, and believe me, they can be objective. I've had more meetings with them involved, and they both can be objective when it comes to certain topics. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to say, I respect Carolyn Lund. I definitely think that you're a strong woman and you have strong opinions. I am very concerned that you'll have to recuse yourself out of many of the issues that come in front of the planning board, and I consider that a real problem. So I am unfortunately not going to vote for you, but I do hope that you will stay on commissions or look into doing something else with the town if you're not on the planning board. I am just really concerned about that, and we would need that alternative, that vote, and I think it's crucial. But I do thank you for applying.
Thank you.
Frank, can I comment on that?
I have a question for Carolyn. Are you a CEO of a multi-million-dollar solar company? Okay, even a small one?
No.
Well, see, that's the sort of thing, if that company came before your planning board and you were the CEO or involved with it, then you'd recuse. For having an opinion about something doesn't mean you have to recuse. Well, Scott clearly said that before something was going to happen, he was not in favor of that sort of thing.
Oh, no, right.
You know what I mean?
Again, I think, just come on. So basically, my line of questioning during the interview centered around, Carolyn's contribution to a fund for anti-solar activities, for lack of a better, So I obviously, she'll have to seek an opinion from the Ethics Commission if, in fact, something comes before the board and you're on the board. So that's on you. That's something you have to do. And then, again, I just want to make sure that you're going to be objective in all other things, because
See, my position with regards to that, and I appreciate your concern, and it's valid. If I was sitting in your seat, I would say the same thing. But my commitment to the application that I filed included the very basic concept that I have of the commitment is not to me or anybody else behind me or around me. The application was submitted for the town. I have absolutely no concern that I would be able to take a view, a position, or a potential vote for the best interest of the town and the residents. That's what this whole thing is about. And I know it might sound odd that somebody is saying that, or the truth is, my big joke is I'm too dumb to tell stories, because I can never remember what I told yesterday, but that's who I am. So that when it took a lot of discussion between me and Jeff before it was actually done, because we wanted to be sure that both of us were comfortable wearing those shoes. And it would be a joint effort, right? Move this all over the place with you. So both of us are confident in that, but for me, for my personality, for my background, and my first step forward, that's where I come from, and that's where I want to go. I wouldn't jeopardize anything that big and that special. It would only result in a huge disaster, right? Lawsuits or whatever, big mistakes like that. That's not where I would go. If I had to seek the advice of a commission, I would do that. Okay, I'm willing to go forward that way. But if you still have those apprehensions, I completely appreciate it. Okay?
The bottom line is that appointments are political in nature, although usually they're not. In the history of the planning board in this town, and I remember the big box store, they were very political, and people were removed on land use commissions in this town. And alternates were bypassed and full appointments. In fact, I ran a meeting, I was vice president years ago, and 2 people were put into full positions over alternates. So I know the politics, although it hasn't been political as of late. I believe that you shared a lot of the values that I have. I'm delighted you applied. I believe Mr. Wheel had a lot of the values that I believe in, and I trust you with the future of this town. But it's not all this objectivity. There is subjectivity in politics and government, and including being on the town council. And I really am a little concerned about people suggesting about objectivity. We've seen the town council repeatedly overlook unanimous votes of the planning board of this town in regard to the solar situation, and they put their name behind it unanimously multiple times, and the council did it anyway. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say I support Carolyn. And,
This appointment as an alternate to the plan has nothing to do with town council legislative decisions. Absolutely, Scott, you're absolutely wrong in that, Scott. You know, again, my point to you and to Steve was to please be objective, because you really need to be.
Absolutely.
And that is certainly as important as being subjective. So, you know, my point's been made. You know, Scott goes off on the wrong tangent, in my opinion. That's absolutely wrong. But,
And it's also, I'm interested in not only economic development, but I'm interested in my widows, my stressed, my fixed income, my people who cannot live here. And I am very concerned about my poor, the ones who can't fight, who can't come out at night. And there are hundreds and hundreds of them. And those are my concern. It is not just ours. It is people on the street who are in tears when I talk to them. So I am concerned on a whole different issue than politics, which I do not do. But thank you for understanding. I do think you'd be wonderful on any number of boards.
Everybody, none of us are untouched by strangers or loved ones in poverty. And it pulls on your heartstrings, and we are faced with difficult decisions often that we bring on ourselves because we see a situation that really hurts so bad. You know, do we want to get involved in it? We are advocates for people who should have more than they do, and we practice that on a routine basis. So this is a wholesome experience that I'm looking for. I know that the fiduciary responsibilities of the town council feed off of decisions that are made at the planning board. You know, and I sit at my house at the end of the day, and once a year you get a piece of paper from the town that says you owe money. It's not all about that. Jeff and I got involved last year in the town, and we've been coming to these meetings, not just because we're interested in seeing what's happening with the solar projects, because we want to know better, we want to understand better, and we want to contribute better. So, for all of those reasons, I would love to be able to support the town council and the planning board. And it makes my discussions with my neighbors and my friends and the people that we bumped into all over the place, we all know everybody, it's a really small town, but it makes the discussions feel a lot stronger, because I tell people, if you've got something to say, get your butt in there. You know, we go to these meetings, where are you? You know, you have an opinion, go to the meeting. And that's, you know, that's initiating some of our interest in having me participate on the planning board.
Yeah, and again, to Scott's earlier point, you know, the planning board, when they meet and give an advisory opinion to this legislative board, it's advisory in nature, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
And if we want to go in a different direction, we will.
We will.
And so that's the point I'm trying to make.
Nice
So it is. I mean, obviously, in my opinion, personally, it hasn't been a lot of objectivity in the planning board's decisions. That's my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing to do on you. I just want to impress upon you that, you know, it's important to make your own decisions and don't just go along to get along.
Right.
Because I've done that, and it's a lot of regret later on, and you're like, geez, maybe I should have said something. So I just want to make that point well known. And as far as the recusal, that's something, again, depending on the solicitor's advice, you'd have to seek an opinion from the Ethics Commission on that. And as long as you're willing to do that, then that's fine. So
I do have a lot of political people in my family too. I mean, they're not actively involved, but I have a lot of respect for them. And they were never noisy, and they were always respected. And I got a lot of my grounding from my godfather, was Kenny Mancuso. He was the chief of the Cranston Police Department. His brother being Tony, Tony's daughter being Eva. These are all people that surrounded our lives. I grew up in Federal Hill. You know, I had my sit down with Buddy. I've got that background, and I see what I respect, and I want you to know I respect you guys. You know, after seeing the long, dragged-out meetings that you went through just on that one big solar project, I have a lot of respect for you. You know, it's a huge commitment, and you get the good, bad, and the ugly, and you still come back and you do your job. I appreciate that. So I want to get back to you.
And to that point, Carol, you know, I think earlier on, the relationship, I should say, was probably a little more contentious in the beginning. You know, it certainly eased over time.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think, you know, we probably share different thoughts on whether it's the solar or anything else. But again, you know, I have a commitment to what I believe in, and so does everyone else. So, you know, but even though my vote has probably not gone the way that you may have thought on particular solar projects, it's just the way I feel, and I can substantiate. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
You know, so you can have different opinions, and as long as you can substantiate them, I think that's what it's all about.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very much. So we have a motion made and seconded, I believe. All those in favor of Carolyn Light's appointment as an alternate to the planning board?
Aye.
I'll say aye. And Barbara?
Nay.
Okay. So it passed 4-1.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Last public forum. Yes, sir.
I would just like to say something. Barbara mentioned a few items where she has a strong commitment, and I can appreciate that. Frank and I have agreed to disagree. His opinion is, and he has to look at it financially for the town, and I respect him for that. He's been consistent on every one of these projects where he's voted yes. That's his personal feeling. He's looking for the best interest in the town. The Light family has a commitment. They donated money because of their strong commitment and their strong feelings. I'm not asking Barbara, and I'm not asking Frank to recruit their votes. Why should we ask a member of the planning board? I understand the chair of the planning board has to, because he does work for particular projects. I understand that. But if Barbara's not going to recruit, or anyone else on that council, why should she have to recruit? I don't understand.
Well, it's a legal opinion, but again, she has to seek an ethics opinion to recuse herself because she's donated money against a certain industry. And if she's going to be voting on that, right, Kevin, it's my opinion that she probably should seek an advisory opinion from the
But
ethics.
it's not a financial gain for her.
Well, no.
She has no financial
It's,
gain.
it's, all it is it's like a preventative thing. The Ethics Commission is willing to do advisory opinions ahead of time, and it's, you know, I've had another situation where another member of the planning board needed, at the beginning of something he was thinking about, he needed to check into whether that would be a problem under the Code of Ethics. So I put him in touch with the right people at the Ethics Commission to familiarize him with the process and apply. And he did that, and he got an opinion. He was able to do what he wanted to do. So it's a better safe than sorry thing, that's all. And I would do the same thing for Mrs. Light. I steer her in the right direction. If this is who you call, this is what you do, and they take it from there. And it's in everybody's best interest to have it. Because you can do it. There's a lot of things in the law you can't check ahead of time. Am I going to get in trouble if I do this? This is one where you can do it, and I encourage public officials to do that because it's an ounce of prevention.
And I think too, she's donated money to that cause, right? So what if, you know, the cause ends up, you know, successful in court or something, and then, you know, we're you know, have to pay out on something? It certainly is financial, Joe, so that's even more so where it's a problem. And I think it's certainly important, if she wants to serve for the town, that she certainly gets an opinion on any solar related, in my opinion, any solar related projects before them. I think it's just it's better to be safe than sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? One more. Yes, Jim.
Time's up. Jeff Light, 43 Barksdale Drive. Thank you guys for handling as objectively as you did Carol's application. I just want to make it blatantly clear to everybody in the room,
Carol and I are not against solar, okay? Our contribution to the GoFundMe page was to support researching proper rezoning, okay? It has nothing to do with solar. It was about keeping the town with the RFR80 designation as much as possible. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
As it relates to solar. I mean,
Anything,
oh, okay.
anything. And we're not abutters to anything. We'll never be abutters to anything. And I just want to make that perfectly clear to everybody that this is our town too. And luckily enough, she was the one who stood up before I did because I wasn't doing it. So. But thank you all for the way it's handled.
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn in memory and honor of Fred Stanley, the fire chief of Hope Valley Fire District for the last 51 years. He will be sadly missed. And he had a wonderful funeral on Sunday.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.